Hello, hello, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate having you. As you're entering the room, maybe you can give us some insight about who you are, your grade, the city you're from, and your top college pick. So go ahead and do that. What grade are you in? What city are you from? And your top college pick. They're so excited, they don't want to tell us. So what grade are you in the chat, and the city you're from, and also your top college pick. Anyone? Not really eager to do that, are they?
Joanna, I'm seeing some messages in the Q&A that say the chat is disabled.
Oh, well, what about the Q&A? Can you, yeah, we got in the Q&A, so maybe everyone go ahead and type that there. Not sure why they disabled it. But tell us the grade you're in, city, and your top college pick.
We don't bite, so feel free to share.
Yeah, exactly. Good, there we go. Baseball. Excellent. Good. All right. So as we move along here, let me just make a quick introduction. My name is Joanna Severino, and I'm the founder and president of Prepskills and the US College Expo. And we're so excited to have our Canadians who decided to take the route to US colleges, some highly selective colleges, and they're going to share their insights today. But given the questions that we got, I wanted to just unpack the framework a bit and help you understand that the US colleges do take a holistic approach to admissions. And so they will look at your academic record, and that's from grade 9 to 12, and convert that into a GPA. And some of you may be attending high schools that offer IB, International Baccalaureate programs, or others may be taking courses such as AP courses. So that's all factored into consideration. The second piece in terms of pillars of success, so one being your academic record, the second is would be standardized tests like the SAT or ACT. Now we'll talk a little bit more about that because I know there were some questions around, is it even applicable at this point? Or maybe you've come across some colleges that are indicating that they're test optional. So what does that mean? Should you submit, not submit? And at Prepskills, we're obviously of the mindset that you want to put your best foot forward and ensure that you are competitive with respect to this process. So yes, we definitely recommend that you submit an SAT. There are lots of benefits around that, or ACT, and that includes merit, academic scholarships, and overall, I always tell families and parents, if you're looking at College Board, collegeboard.org, and they're the creators of the SAT. If that website is still up and running, then that's probably an indication that you should be submitting an SAT score. And I think last year they had about 1.7, 1.8 million test takers. So in order to make yourself really stand out and be competitive, the SAT is out of 1,600 points. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but just wanted to put that out there. The third pillar being your application. Who are you? How do you stand out? That personal statement, that's a part of the application. You may have heard about the application website called common.app.org. A great number of the colleges do utilize the Common application, and that's probably over 1,000 or so schools right now using the Common app, and there are over 4,000 options in the United States. but just to keep that in mind that overall, they will look at your profile holistically. So we'll talk more about that. So those are the three pillars. In addition to that, if you're a student athlete looking to apply and you have that special talent, you need to ensure that you're eligible for recruitment. And those of you thinking of NCAA, for example, ncaa.org, you need to ensure that you have what are called your 16 core courses. And we can do a deep dive into that if you have questions a little later, but wanted to make sure that you had that information. In addition, with respect to those who are thinking about the performing arts, you may have auditions or you may need to submit a portfolio. So I want you to think about that framework as we move into the conversation. Now, welcome to our incredible guests. Thank you for being with us today. I thought we would start by maybe just talking a little bit about what inspired you to apply to the United States, like in terms of educational choice. What inspired you? Hiba, and let us know which school you attended.
Yes, of course. What inspired me, I would say it's probably my father, who had attended a US school himself, actually schools. He attended Berkeley, as well as the University of Minnesota. And it was, you know, I have to say it wasn't as a kid at the time. It wasn't like I sat down and considered all my options and things like that, but I was very intentional about within the US, where do I want to apply as far as what my dream schools are, what my mid-range schools were, and what my safety schools would be. And I ended up attending Cornell University, which was amazing, absolutely phenomenal campus experience. The academics were rigorous, to say the least. And yeah, I loved it. It definitely depends on also beyond sort of the prestige and the specific major concentrations you're looking into. I would also recommend really looking at the environment that you're going to be in. So if you really want to be in an urban environment and then you end up at Cornell University, you're probably not going to be happy. Cornell is like waterfalls, deer on campus, squirrels. Like if you're into gorges, like if you're into nature, and if you're into that backdrop, then that will definitely be part of, or should be part of, your decision-making process. And it is cold also. Climate is very important as well. But yeah, there are multiple factors, and make sure that you really do create a high level outline of these different buckets or categories, and what your sort of priority or desire is in each category. I would always start with that, so that you can get the most value out of your experience.
And how many schools did you apply to, Hiba?
I applied to 7. I applied to a couple of UCs, UCLA, UC Davis. I applied to Duke University. I applied to Stanford. I applied to the University of Michigan, Northwestern University. I think that covers it. And Cornell, obviously.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that intro. Richard?
Thank you very much for the invitation, Joanna. My name's Richard. I went through the Prepskills SAT prep course and also a seminar on filling out the common applications and things like that. I went to NYU for undergraduate degree. I studied physics and math, and then I went on to MIT for my PhD degree in applied mathematics. Reason for applying US colleges, for one thing, my family was immigrating from Toronto to the US, so it made sense for us to for me to do US schools at that point. And I also figured that the United States was a much larger country with a lot more opportunities and a lot more challenges as well, which we can talk about. So I figured it was the best choice for me at the moment. I'm currently living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right next to MIT. Yeah, so I'm happy to take any questions. Is there any questions that I'm supposed to answer at this moment, Joanna?
Maybe you just give us some insight as to what led you to NYU initially. Was that one of your top choices, or?
Yeah, so I really resonate with what Hiba said. You have to be you need to understand the environment that you live. And for me, I grew up in the city, and I would not live in a rural area. So for me, I wanted to live in big cities like San Francisco, New York, or Boston. And I applied for about 8 schools. NYU was among the top. I think I had like 3 top, which was NYU, Cornell, not Cornell, NYU, Boston University, and Berkeley. And I got admitted into NYU, got waitlisted at the other 2. So yeah, that's how I ended up at NYU. And NYU had a really had a top math program, and for me at that moment, I wanted to be an academic, so I optimized for what would prepare me for the best graduate school options, and for the area of research that I wanted to pursue. And I'm not an academic right now, and we can also talk about how, you know, my transition from academia into industry and now onto entrepreneurship.
And did you have that trajectory in mind in terms of NYU and then thinking about MIT?
I had the trajectory of NYU thinking about a top graduate school program. When I applied for graduate school, I applied for the, you know, knowing where I stood academically, I aimed for sort of a tier that's above NYU. So that's the MIT, Harvard, and Stanford. So yeah, that's what I did.
Great, thanks for that intro. Sally, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me, Joanna. So I'm going to just, I guess, go through the school that I got recruited to, which was Princeton. I had a bit of a different path, I'm guessing, than most of the panelists, although I'm not entirely sure. I was a recruited athlete. I played ice hockey. And so for me, it was sort of figuring out the schools I was interested in, of course, academically, but also athletically, you know, the schools that had competitive teams. And you get recruited back then, you got recruited at quite a young age. So you started hearing from coaches in 9th grade. And then I just spent time, you know, sort of, you know, maintaining the discussion with coaches and then going down to visit schools eventually. And in the end, I chose Princeton. The final 4 schools I was looking at and considering were Harvard, BU, and Northeastern, and Princeton. And so we can, you know, talk about those. I can explain why I chose Princeton over Harvard. There are various reasons. Very happy with the decision in the end. It was a great 4 years, beautiful campus, amazing support on pretty much every level. And then after that, so yeah, I guess that's my story in terms of why I chose the American path. It sort of chose me for sports, but of course academically, right? I think they're some of the schools I mentioned and the other ones that some of the panelists have mentioned already are excellent opportunities beyond athletics, but certainly playing a sport is helpful to sort of pursuing that path. And I mean, beyond the academics as well, which are exceptional, the support you get for your sport is amazing. So I saw in the chat a few of you are interested in playing a sport in the States, and I would, you know, I 100% advocate for that. I think in terms of resources, in terms of how seriously the schools take the sport, sporting period, on both the men's and the women's side is, you know, second to none. So I think it's something certainly worth pursuing. And then just briefly, I'll note that after that, I moved to my undergrad, I moved to New York. I did an internship for a year, but I had deferred admission to Columbia's post-bac program. So just for pre-med courses, and you guys can ask me questions about that too. So I did a couple years at Columbia. And then I moved out of the States, even though I loved it. It was time to move on. And I now go back and forth between Toronto and Cambridge in the UK. And we have another Cambridge here in the States. So I'm back in the old world. And I originally went over in 2018 to do a master's at Cambridge. I did what's called an MPhil, a master's of philosophy in health, medicine, and society at Cambridge. and thoroughly enjoyed that. Did some research after that for the university, and then decided to stick around because I absolutely adore the town and the school. So yeah, and I'm back in Toronto now, and I sort of, like I said, go back and forth. So you guys can ask me about the British pathway as well if you're interested in Oxford and Cambridge, because I help students out a lot with that as well.
Wonderful. And maybe just highlight, there were some questions around balancing academics and athletics as a student.
Yeah.
athlete. How did you find that transition? And did you go in with the mindset, let me leverage my athletic ability to get a degree at Princeton, or were you moving towards the Olympics? What was your mindset at that point?
Yeah, that's a good question, Joanna. Never did I have in mind that, I was very serious about my sport, absolutely adored it. And anyone playing at a high level, I mean, you have to, right? Otherwise you don't get to that level. But I think, something that's important to know about Ivies is that they don't offer sports scholarships. I think a lot of people sort of think, and they don't offer scholarships at all, essentially, right? They have financial aid, which is excellent, right? They basically sort of, look at what the family makes and your assets, et cetera. And then they sort of, tell you, this is what we think you'd be able to afford. So back to the sort of sport, leveraging your sport. I mean, certainly sports help you get into these schools because they're looking for a well-rounded applicant. That doesn't mean that you ride on your athletics. And that ties into the money thing. I mean, there are some schools, right, where you can get a full ride for your sport. Some of the state schools, et cetera, right? This is why I was looking at BU, Northeastern. But if you want to go to an Ivy League, academics are number one. No question. So I, chose that path because that was my goal, to commit entirely to my academic path. That's not to say you don't take your sport seriously when you're there, but I remember my coach always said, you're a student athlete and student comes first, and don't forget that. So, by no means are you sort of, leverage is a bit of a tricky verb it certainly makes you a more competitive applicant. But is it something that's going to carry you through your schooling? Absolutely not. If that's helpful.
That's great.
Yeah.
Hannah, welcome.
Hi, Joanna. Thank you for having me. It's so great to be with everyone today and with all these panelists.
Thank you.
My path to the States, when I was 15 years old, I went with my dad on a trip to New York, and towards the end of that time, I got to see Columbia's campus, and I just fell in love. I grew up in Toronto, and Toronto felt small. So that, to give you a little bit of perspective, I was like, oh, I want to go to school in New York. So when I came back to Toronto, I actually started to do some research on what that would look like. And I found the college fair that is hosted by Prepskills, where a bunch of universities come and sort of talk to students. And so this was pre-COVID and in person. And I spoke to a representative from Penn State University. And she really encouraged me to think about financing my education, which at this point I had no conception of, and the differences between Canadian universities and American universities. I really was coming from a complete lack of knowledge in terms of like my baseline. So she encouraged me to look into scholarships. And I started to expand the schools that I would have considered for undergrad. And I applied to just as many programs as I could. And eventually I attended Duke University through the Robertson Scholars Program. And I studied political science, more specifically like security and like conflict resolution. But Duke, if any of you know, is in a very small town in North Carolina, very rural. So the complete opposite of what I was hoping to achieve by attending Columbia. But honestly, like it probably would have been the same kind of experience that I had in high school, which in terms of size. So very small and like intimate learning experience, which I later on grew to appreciate. And also for everyone participating, like I went to a performing arts high school, public education in Thornhill. So, you know, anyone who's thinking about attending University in the States from that background and upbringing, it's definitely possible, and it's possible to do it for free. I'm interested.
And Hannah, I know there was a question around studying law in the United States, and I think that's your pathway now. Did you consider graduate level in the US? Or?
Yeah, I'm currently in the process. I've been in the process for like the last year or so. It's definitely easier to transition from my perspective, like transition and attend law school in the US if you have gone to undergrad in the US, just because there's so many resources available to you at the undergraduate level. And there is an office in at least in my university that was dedicated to helping students identify graduate scholarships for law school, and also really just guide you through the application process, which is radically different from what I went through when I was applying for undergrad. And so it's pretty straightforward. You apply, you take your LSATs and you source recommendation letters. And so it's similar to the undergrad process in that way. But you have to be a little bit more creative when you're looking for funding for graduate school across the board, because the majority of opportunities for scholarships and support for financing your education are at the undergraduate level. But it's still possible, and I'm keeping my mind open.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Hannah. Welcome, Kevin. Kevin, welcome.
Hi all. I'm having a bit of technical difficulty, so I'm calling on my phone. So I have sort of a similar story to Hannah, where I think in grade 10 in the summer, I visited California for the first time with family. And growing up in Toronto with cold winters, it was hard not to just fall in love. And I was pretty set on going to the West Coast at that point for college. So I ended up attending UCLA. I graduated in 2020. And yeah, so I think the point that I sort of want to get across today, hopefully, is I think one of the most difficult things to get right, especially through the application process, is making sure that you sort of select the right school for you. So I had an absolute blast. And so I'm at UCLA, and I'm hoping to talk to you guys about that a bit more.
And did you only consider California colleges, or?
No, the 3 schools I applied to on the East Coast were all like sort of dream schools, were Princeton, Harvard, and UPenn. Yeah.
Okay. And you're happy with the warmth of California where you ended up?
Yeah, I'm calling from Los Angeles right now, so I decided to stay.
Great. Terrific. Thanks, Kevin. And Andrew, welcome. Great to see you.
Hey, Joanna, how you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I guess my journey to the States, kind of similar to Kevin's. Like, at first, I think it was purely like you have at least I had a view of like American schools in my mind as like this thing of prestige, and I just was a high achieving person. And I was like, oh, I always want to do the best, and so I initially wanted to go to Cambridge because that's where my mom grew up, was in London. Then I visited there and realized they didn't really have the best financial aid. So I was like, okay, I can't go there. Grade 11, I decided to visit California, and I visited UC Berkeley and Stanford. Again, UC Berkeley for out-of-state residents didn't really have the best financial aid, but Stanford did. And same thing to Kevin. I was like, yeah, I love the weather here. So I really set my mind on Stanford, and it was the only school that I wanted to go to, the only school that I applied to early. Well, the only school I guess you can apply to early, but I like had set my mind on it. Then I got rejected, and I was very dejected, and I was like, okay, I don't want to apply anywhere else. a couple days before the deadline, I was like, okay, I'll apply to like 5 other schools, which were all like Ivy Leagues, because to me, I felt that like based on the price, it didn't make sense for me to go to like an American school if I was going to be paying that much money, instead of going to a Canadian school where you can get a really good quality education for like a fraction of the cost. So I only applied to schools that would offer like a good amount of financial aid, which were, I think, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, and Columbia. And then I only ended up getting into Harvard, which makes the decision very easy. But I decided to come here. I was pretty set on studying environmental science and engineering, and that's what I study. I took a gap year in the middle of college during COVID, and it was a very like self-reflective time. Spent a lot of time thinking about my passions, and came back, decided to get a secondary in music, and so that's kind of what I spend most of my time doing now. But yeah, that's my pathway.
Wonderful. And you just graduated.
Yeah, well, not yet technically. We'll see on Monday when my grades come in. But yeah, I finished all my assignments, so now I'm just relaxing.
And does that mean you're coming home to Canada, or that's up in the air?
Yeah. I'm gonna be coming home end of May, and I'll be there for the summer, just relaxing and making music. So yeah.
Well, I commend you for taking that step, a couple of days before applications are due. You switch gears. You've done all the work anyway, right, to that point. And so I'm so pleased to hear that you didn't really let up on the dream of going. And there you go, Harvard, not so bad, right? Excellent. Good. You mentioned price, and I know that's on everyone's mind in terms of finances and affordability. Why pay the sticker price or the exchange rate for that matter and go to the US? I just wanted to start by saying to the families that there are opportunities, like there are cross-border tuition agreements with many of the colleges. You're also able to get social assistance, like those of you in Ontario, you're familiar with the OSAT. Registered education saving plans can be applied, and then financial aid and merit academic scholarships. So maybe you can touch on, without going into too much detail, sort of what opportunities and resources you sought out to be able to afford the opportunity. We'll start with Hiba.
Yeah, so I don't think this is going to apply to me because I'm actually not a Canadian citizen. I'm a Canadian permanent resident. So I'm a citizen of Kuwait, and I received a merit-based scholarship from my government, the Ministry of Higher Education of Kuwait, and it was a full ride. So that definitely, outside of that, the consideration would have been different as far as where I was going to apply. For international students, I do believe that Canada is a lower cost than US schools, but really for international students, it is a very, very high cost. I think it's like triple what domestic students pay. So yeah, for me, the merit scholarship was the sort of entry point into even considering applying, and I knew I was going to be fine because I was very achieving academically at a high level, so I knew I would be able to get in. So that's all I considered. I just considered US schools, and then within that I knew I needed to be smart, so I had to, like I mentioned earlier, I had to do the sort of the dream schools, the mid-range, and the safety just in case. But knowing that I was going to get a full ride to any of them was sort of what sealed the deal for me and enabled me to go on that path. I'll pass it on.
Right. Richard?
Yeah, so I was a U.S. permanent resident when I went to NYU, and then I became a citizen. So a lot of what I offered might be more suitable for U.S. citizens and PR than otherwise. There are government loans, and first of all, government sponsored subsidies that you can undertake. I'm blanking out on the names, but there are also low interest loans that you can apply for as a U.S. Person. The Perkins loan, and there's subsidized loans, and the interest rate is pretty low. So I would recommend, if you're a U.S. person, look into those. My school at NYU offered scholarships for all first-year entry freshmen. So I received some of that, and then I did some research while I was in school about some of these scholarships that NYU offers. So there's one called a presidential scholarship, which you are eligible to apply for if you meet a certain GPA criteria. There's one that's reserved for math majors, which I applied and received. And by the time I graduated, they also offer scholarships for when you for your last year. So I think the money is there. I would encourage, I think I answered one of the questions in the chat. I would encourage you to do your research. Sometimes you may just have to click some buttons and fill out the forms, and then next thing you know, you save $30,000 for your parents. So there's that. Yeah.
Sally?
I would probably echo what I think Andrew had mentioned about finding schools that have pretty good financial aid. And I think a lot of people are surprised to hear that about some of the top Ivies, but I remember Princeton and Harvard in particular are really good with that. So it's something to consider. And then on the athlete front, as I mentioned, I mean, some schools you'll be able to go full ride, which is really something to consider. And I, really had to think about that too, in terms of like, okay, if you turn left, free ride through school, right? And then you turn right and you have a little bit of a different educational experience, but it's going to cost a little bit, and everyone has to make that decision. I would also, again, this is focused on the US schools, but I'd echo Andrew again in that Cambridge and the British path isn't always as helpful in terms of scholarships and funding. I mean, again, it's helpful there to be a citizen of that country, and then school is just cheaper, full stop. So yeah, I'd just say, can you still hear me? Everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. So I just say sort of, doing the research early on, I'd probably be better to speak to in terms of, opportunities once you get into the school too, like something to consider, right? Going to a top Ivy and, those on the panel who've been to top Ivies, you probably echo what I'm about to say, but, expensive in terms of price tag. You can get some financial aid, but once you get in, the resources available to you are incredible. So, my experience, for example, writing a thesis that was connected to First Nations Health in Canada, like Princeton paid for me to fly through Northern Canada, go into different communities, spend time there, interview people. Like that's something that's not necessarily happening at schools that are perhaps a little bit further down in terms of the tiering we've been talking about. So it's something to think about too. I'm not saying, it's fully worth the full price tag, because it is pretty crazy. But that's some of what you're paying for, if that makes sense. Like once you get in, there are some pretty incredible resources that if you put forth the proposal that is worthy, you can be supported in many ways through your 4 years.
And did you utilize OSAP or education plans at all?
No, so I don't have as much experience with that. So I didn't, the OSAP is the Ontario pool of money. Yeah, no. I remember when I was younger, there was funding for like being in the Olympic program. But again, that's not really connected to apply or going to school, although maybe some students had used that. I can't speak to that. And I didn't apply to any Canadian schools. So I don't know if that also is probably something, I wouldn't be able to talk about as much.
Good. Thank you. Hannah.
I want to build on 2 points that Sally and Richard have both mentioned. To Sally's point, it's not just necessarily resources like in terms of funding for your thesis or things like that, like financial scholarships that you get once you're admitted to the university, but also sometimes like in kind scholarships. So once I was admitted in the month like before classes sort of started, I was notified. I didn't even apply for this, but I was notified that the there was a special like smaller scholarship through the university that would provide me with a laptop and textbooks for some of my classes, which was excellent. And then the other thing I wanted to address, as Richard mentioned, that your process will look different if you have any claim to the States. That is a huge advantage if you are a permanent resident. I am speaking from the perspective of someone who is a Canadian citizen. That's a different process as well. And so similarly to any international student, your target can be merit scholarships because there are schools that offer those, and that kind of has nothing to do with your citizenship or your status, so to speak. And those are not related to your finances either. So there are a couple of great ones. There's one at Vanderbilt. There is Moorhead Kane program at UNC Chapel Hill. There's the Robertson Scholars program, which I did at Duke. And then there are some that are like entrance merit scholarships, like full rides. So at Duke, there was the David Rubenstein program that recently was developed. And it's very similar to the program that I did, except you don't have to fill out a separate application and go through the process in the months leading up to admission. So I started doing research and compiling a list in grade 11. It probably would have benefited me to start way earlier, but I just didn't know about these opportunities. But I was, again, coming from the perspective of I have no intention to take any loans to finance my education. It's just not an option for me. If that's the case, I would rather stay in Canada and try and get as much funding as I can as a Canadian. So it is possible. But for merit scholarships, it's really about articulating who you are as an individual, your story, what sets you apart, and what will make you a great member of a bigger program. So it's not necessarily that they're trying to find like 15 perfect people or perfect students. It's you are a part of a bigger sort of mosaic, and they're building their program with that in mind. So everyone has to complement one another. So if you are adaptable and creative and you're able to convey that through your application, and you are prepared, so you start as early as possible, it's worth a shot.
Yeah, a little research goes a long way, definitely. We sent some communication to our Prepskills families around the SAT opportunity for an academic merit scholarship based on score. And it's incredible to see the sort of the dollar value attributed to a single score, upwards of $10,000-15,000 for non-residents on that one basis, which is incredible. So thanks, Hannah. And Kevin, besides the sunshine, were you looking at the finances, or was that more your parents looking at finances?
Yeah, I'm very, very fortunate. It was more my parents who dealt with that than me. But I want to echo the point that was said earlier about like opportunities that are available once you're a student already. I remember at UCLA, there's like, I don't remember the exact website, but we had a website with like over 10 pages of both merit and need-based scholarships that students can apply to every year. So the money is for sure there. And, you know, I have a lot of international student friends who also receive, you know, financial aid. But again, I can't really speak to that process too much, but I do think that the money is there. Yeah.
Wonderful. And Andrew.
Yeah, so echoing again what everyone else has said, I primarily looked at schools. So I'm an American citizen, so that helped obviously a lot. But the schools that I was applying to were all schools that were needs aligned to financial aid. And so if you're an American resident, or if you're an American citizen, I think again, I don't know if you can quote me on this, but I think most schools are needs blind, which means if you indicate that you're applying for financial aid, they won't take that into account. Whereas if you're an international student, if you're applying for financial aid, they will take that into account. And I don't know how much they take that into account. I really don't think it's that big of a factor. Like if you are a great applicant, I think they'll want you no matter what. But I know for a fact Stanford and Harvard students, I think Princeton and Yale are as well. And so that's something big to look at. The financial aid program at these schools are like,
Oh, I think Andrew's frozen.
I think he was about to say they're amazing, those
Yeah.
programs. So you could probably finish his sentence there until he comes back.
well, if not,
Oh,
much
there we
cheaper
go.
actually. Oh, were you guys not be able to hear me during that whole time?
Yeah. Go.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
he
what-
just came back.
Andrew.
When did I cut off? When did I cut off?
We lost you for about 20 seconds.
20 seconds, damn. Okay. So did you hear the thing about the financial, like the needs blind financial aid?
Needs blind versus needs aware. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So what I was saying is Harvard's financial aid is needs blind for international students. So is Stanford, and I think Princeton and Yale's are as well. When you apply, there's financial aid calculators on most universities' websites. So I would use that to see how feasible it is. You can get your parents' help, or if the parents are on here, have the parents do it, because you have to put like little boxes about your income, about your assets, and it'll come out with obviously not an exact number, but an estimation of how much aid you'll get. And that's what told me that this would be feasible. Then on top of that, I would say understand that like every little bit counts. Obviously, you want these ideas of like full ride scholarships and $15,000-$30,000 scholarships, but the $500, $1,000, $1,500 scholarships add up, and a lot of people don't apply for them. So especially in Canada, I would look towards that to supplement some of the costs. I did use OSAP. I use an RESP. Once you're on campus, I got a job here, and that helped subsidize. Also, the job I got was amazing. It's this place called the Learning Labs, where you basically, anytime a class needs to do some sort of creative project, they come into the Learning Labs and we help them like make a podcast or make like a YouTube style video explaining a specific concept. And that's actually where I learned how to produce music, and it got me into music. So these aren't just jobs that, you know, you do just for the money. They can actually enrich your college experience. And then finally, the point that a lot of people have mentioned, which is once you're here, we have scholarships. We also call them fellowships that will allow you to just travel and go to different places to do research. I am going to be doing research in India in the fall on one of these fellowships. And so they're, and like same thing that Kevin was saying, there's like 10 pages of them. People don't really apply for them. So yeah, that's kind of my advice. My advice would be like to people in high school, use the financial aid calculators, do your research, start planning and asking your high school what local like smaller scholarships there are. And yeah, that's what I would say.
Wonderful. And did any of you apply early action, early decision there? And maybe Sally, can you talk to that, the distinction of applying early versus regular?
Yeah, so I didn't apply early because I had a very different path with the recruiting process. I mean, you know, pretty early on where you're going, but in terms of like formally working through ED or EA, that just didn't happen for me, but certainly an option for students. So the major difference, I mean, applying early means you're getting your application in November. Typically November 1 is the most common date, but sometimes schools will have like a second date as well, mid-November. So you really have to look at school specific. You have to take a look online, and they'll all make this very clear and sort of, you know, easily accessible. But basically you're applying early to sort of demonstrate to the school that that is the place you want to spend the next 4 years. So you get to select one school if you want to do this. You don't have to. And you would apply early. ED versus EA. So early decision plans are binding, which means essentially you're telling the school, I'm applying to you, ahead of every other school because I want to go to your school if you admit me. And if you do admit me, that's what I'm doing. So you're basically giving them your word. Students ask me like, well, what if I back out? It's just like, don't go there, like it's just, it's a morals thing, of course, but also like, I'm not even sure what would happen there. Like, would the schools honor each other and then not take you? I don't know. So I would just say if you love a school in particular, I'd say go for it. Apply early. ED, I think EA is nicer, be early action, because again, you're applying early, but you're not, required to go there if you get in. And then, what are the advantages of it? Well, you're showing the school that, that's your number one, which is good, right? They like to see that. I wouldn't be able to quote statistics. I think I saw that on one of the questions, well, what's my percentage increase if I apply early? Some of the other panelists, you guys might have numbers on that. I don't, but what I would say is that it does increase your chances. And if you think about it logically, right, you're basically telling a school, listen, you're my number one, right? And they're going to want to hear that. And the odds are greater. They do, take that into consideration. That's why they have the option even available. So I don't know if that is, is that helpful?
That's helpful. And
Okay.
Richard, I know there's huge interest in MIT. I saw that come up quite a bit. What are the chances realistically of getting into MIT at the undergrad level? I think we looked at some of those stats. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I anticipate that question to come up. What are my chances of getting into MIT or Harvard or one of the top schools? So if you look at it from a statistical perspective, it is low. I mean, objectively speaking, we're looking at 5%, or I think this year is around 5%. And for international applicants, they do have a further limit. So, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is low. That's what the statistics says. From a personal perspective, I mean, I would ask myself if I were in the shoes of a current, high school a student thinking about MIT. The first question is really, is MIT a fit for me? Right? It's not even like, do I want to apply for MIT just because it's famous and that's where Ironman got his degree? The question is, is MIT a fit for me? Right? Do I love living in Boston? Do I love the hack culture? What is the culture of MIT? Right? Come to the campus for a visit, talk to some students, current students, and also alumni. I'm happy to chat if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, and get a sense for yourself. Right. So, and if the answer is yes, I'm interested in applying for MIT, then the second question is, where does that fall under my priorities? MIT my top school? Or is MIT my, is MIT my top school? Like, do I really want to go there and nothing else? Or would it be okay if MIT rejects me and I go to, go somewhere else? So that's where that falls under your priority. And then if MIT is really sort of on your radar, then I would worry about craft an application around how, when you write your essay around specifically why MIT is a fit for you and how you would see yourself survive and thrive in this environment. And the possibilities are limitless, right? You can go through the sports route. I've also heard students start unpaid internships with or paid internships with professors, and that helps with their application, and if especially if the professor is on the committee. But those things are beyond your control. I would come back to the question of whether MIT is a fit for me, whether I see myself being in Boston for 4 years, and where that fits into my long-term goal. And do your best, and put in an application and see what comes up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I certainly wouldn't recommend MIT or bust to our Canadian students, considering that they admitted 13 students in all of Canada last year. So yes, have it as your dream school and work towards that definitive goal, but are there any other options for you to look at? And I think that's really important.
Yeah. I think there's a saying called shoot for the moon, even if you fail, you land among the stars. So yes, you know, the chances are low, but at the same time, it's beyond your control, right? You do your best, and I'm sure the people here at Prepskill will help you prep for the best. And then the rest is, you know, up to fate. So I wouldn't spend energy thinking about, you know, what's my chance of getting in. I will spend more energy thinking about, do I want to be there, and what can I do within my power to maximize my chance, and what are the other alternatives if MIT or Harvard doesn't work out.
Let's talk a little bit about the application process and what colleges look for in the applicant. There is sort of this statement around, should you be a pointy applicant or a well-rounded applicant? And to be a pointy applicant, to really have that spike, that element of what is it about you that really stands out, and a deep dive on your interests and passions. Hiba, when you applied, like, did you consider yourself a well-rounded student applying, or did you have that X factor, that spike that you can think of?
I would say well-rounded. At that point in my life, the kind of sort of teen that I was, I sort of followed all the rules, wanted to get all the high grades, wanted to be part of all the extracurriculars, and I really did have an extremely well-rounded application. However, if you ask me now, if I could go back, or if, you know, which pathway would I favor for myself or for a student that I'm mentoring, I would say pointy. I think that also, just to keep in mind, I am probably quite a bit older than most of the panelists here. I graduated Cornell class of 2010. So I think the sort of the competitive landscape has changed, and what they look for in terms of, you know, in the past they may have favored a more well-rounded applicant, and now with increasing competition, the pointy applicant profile is going to be more desirable. Especially, I will say, with kids these days, they have so much at their disposal, and I see teens doing things that just blow my mind, like building robots and being entrepreneurs. And you know, when I was in high school, we had email. We got email, you know. So this is the landscape has shifted, and that's why I say, while I was a well-rounded applicant, I would favor the pointy applicant in today's day and age.
Andrew, pointy or well-rounded?
I would definitely say I was well-rounded. I just did the things that interested me, and that's what I would say in terms of the advice. That, like, I see it people asking, like, you know, for this program, what extracurriculars would they look at? For Ivies, what extracurriculars? And the thing is, like, and again, this advice might not apply to everyone, but they want to see you enjoy the things that you do. And so, yes, there are students out there who are like building robots and like being entrepreneurs, but hopefully those students are doing it because that's what they enjoy, not because they're trying to get into a specific university. And I find they can actually tell when you're being inauthentic. And going back to, I think, the point that Richard brought up, which is fit, like, we talk about these tierings of schools, yes, but like, I know people who have gone to all these like top tier universities who then had to drop out because it wasn't for them. And the reason it wasn't for them is because they were shooting for these places and tailoring their high school experiences to be at somewhere that wasn't for them. So if you work backwards and think about it more from a process-oriented perspective, like, enjoy the things that you do. I'd say whatever you enjoy, like, take it to the max. You know, if you enjoy it, like being out in nature, go do like a conservation cleanup at like parks in the area, and then, you know, expand it to, you know, maybe like a provincial park and something like that. But don't go build a robot if you love the environment, you know, like, that's not you. And so when you do that, you'll get into the university that appreciates you for you as a person, and that's what's going to lead to your success at that school. Because, you know, people view it like, okay, you know, once I get to Harvard or Princeton or Cornell or Duke, like, my life will be set. But it's not like that. You know, you get here and there's a whole like band of issues that arise, but you can deal with those issues if you went through the process properly, and you're at the school that knows how to treat you the way you deserve to be treated. So that was a lot. I just felt like I needed to say that because that's the advice I give to most high school applicants, especially people trying to apply to top tier universities, is do the things that interest you in high school, and the right school will accept you. For me, like, I think it's silly that we try to have like 15 and 16-year-olds like know what they want to do with their life and be like, oh, I'm going to do everything in robotics because I know that this is what I want to do when I'm older. Like, I know people now, like me, for example, I was going down one complete path, and then this year at like 21, 22, I was like, you know what, I actually want to do music. And so you completely pivot. I didn't do really anything based around music in high school, but I just did, I did sports, I did student government, I did some volunteer work, I did some environmental work, and I was actually able to read my my application, like my application, and the stuff that the like application team, the review team, said about me. And they said stuff like, he's super well-rounded, he did a bunch of leadership things, like everything that he did, he took it to the max point that he could. But what was more important was like the essay that I wrote and the interview that I gave. So yeah, my advice would just be, if you are a well-rounded person and you don't know what it is that you want to do, be well-rounded. If you are someone who has like one thing that really interests you, then be pointy, but don't try to be something that you're not.
And could you talk a little bit about the personal statement, the essay?
Yeah. So the essay is basically your opportunity to put out what isn't on your extracurriculars or your SAT or your grade. So I wouldn't write it about something like, if you were a varsity athlete and that was like your main thing. Actually, well, this is an example. So I was a varsity athlete in high school. I played rugby and football, and then I actually played rugby here at Harvard, but I wasn't recruited for it. And so I actually did write my personal my Common App essay about rugby, but it was basically likening like drawing analogies to rugby and saying how I feel like to identity issues, basically, of feeling like I don't really belong. And so I talked about rugby, but for the most part it was about me as a human being. And then for Harvard, for example, the essay that I wrote was about music. Is about playing music for my grandma who had dementia. And music, again, I didn't really do it in school that often, but I talked about it's. Are you still there?
Yes.
Okay. I talked about its importance to me, and how I use like Spotify playlists to get through my day-to-day life, things like that. And now it's interesting looking back, because now that's actually what I ended up doing. And so that essay was the one that was most personal to me. And that's actually what they really enjoyed about my application, was that these were insights and they make you more than a number. So yes, there's a way of differentiating yourself through, started doing some insane research in high school or starting like a super successful company. But I think what touches home a lot more with the people who are reading them is the fact that they are people. And like, if you write something that shows them something about you and also shows them something about themselves, like if it touches them, then they're going to be like, okay, this is someone who stands out. And I saw a question being like, when should you start? Know yourself, know what your strengths and weaknesses are. My strength is definitely not writing. So I started writing in the summer before grade 12. I had done my SATs in grade 11. And so I was like, the only thing I'm going to be.
We lost you, Andrew. So authenticity, really, really important. And we'll hear from Andrew again. Kevin, pointy or well-rounded?
Yeah, so I think I'm similar. Oh, sorry.
Wait, sorry. I'm assuming I froze again.
I think you cut out again. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, just put a lot of time into that sense. So that's it.
Kevin.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm gonna echo what the other panelists said. I think I was a bit more well-rounded, and I want to say like with maybe like a slight point. I do really, really strongly resonate with what Andrew said, though. I think it's like, okay, when you're 15 or 16 to not know what you want to spend the rest of your life doing. And it's like, that's part of what college is for, right? You're going to be exposed to so many new like industries and majors, and you might not even know yeah, you just don't know what you don't know, right? So it's okay that you haven't like, if you're not like 16, you're like, I haven't, you know, done the most like crazy thing, like I haven't made the front page of a newspaper or something like that. Like it's really okay. Um, I would say that, you know, I ended up going to college for computer science, but I was really, really set on being a business student or like going into entrepreneurship. But you know, in grade 11, I ended up taking like a computer science class at my high school, and I just really loved it. Like I was a video game kid. My head was glued to it. My eyes were glued to a screen like 24/7 for a very long period of my childhood. And from there, I just found out that like, you know, I really, really loved software engineering. And that was something like I really thought I was going to business school. I really, really thought I was going to business school. And like I just ended up checking a box here and there. And then it really worked out for me. So I mean, I think when it comes to your application, what schools are really looking for isn't that like, you know exactly the kind of person that you want to be as an adult. Like that is kind of ridiculous. It's more like, can you demonstrate that you're a leader? Can you demonstrate that you have a willingness to learn? Can you demonstrate that you're disciplined, that you're passionate, that you would, you know, contribute positively to the student body? I think those are the things that story that you tell with your application is far more important than whether you are specifically like well-rounded or pointy. So yeah.
Yeah, authenticity and story, terrific. Hannah, pointy or well-rounded?
I was definitely a pointy applicant. So I don't believe in I don't believe in the concept of a pointy person. I don't think anyone is a pointy person. We're all well-rounded individuals, and we all have many different interests that overlap and connect. But who I am as a person was framed as a pointy applicant. That wasn't done intentionally, but I had been working on my interests for many, many years, like throughout my childhood. And so naturally, my application reflected that. And I would say that that's similar for the experience of like a student athlete, for example. Like I find that a lot of student athletes are pointy because that's a big part of their identity. And that comes through in the application process. So for me, I had done a lot of work in the nonprofit world, and I had a background with the UN. And I was doing a lot of that in my home country. And so naturally, when I was putting together my application, my essay spoke to that. And the other parts of my academic experience also reflected that. So it came together in a really nice, presentable story or like box. But obviously, as an individual, when you speak to me or when I had my interview process, like you see the complexity, and there's many more layers beyond just that one kind of face. But I do believe that it is helpful to kind of identify 1 to 2 of your very strong interests, and think about how you want to develop your application, leading with either those interests or those character traits. So a lot of what was mentioned already, which is like adaptability, resilience, and like willingness to learn, like these are all things that universities are seeking in their students when they put together holistically like the class. But yeah, I really do believe that the reason the application process was pretty simple was because those interests that I felt had defined me at that point in time were genuine interests. And they weren't this was like way before the tailoring your application or your essay to fit whatever, X school is looking for. If you authentically care about something and you've been putting in the time and the effort and like years of work towards it, then it will, be conveyed as genuine.
Wonderful. Yes, my 3 R's in education: resourcefulness, resilience, and building rapport with others. Definitely true. Thank you. And so Sally, pointy or well-rounded?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, in terms of, I think some of the other panelists have touched on this, so this idea of like pointy being something to run with here. I don't know. It's a tough analogy. I think I'd probably say they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. Like, I think there's this sort of, if I take that idea of pointiness, maybe that's just your general thread through your narrative. Like, I spend a lot of time helping students to sort of, by the time they get to the application process, how do I actually communicate all these amazing things that I've done? And how do I do it in a way that's cohesive and sort of brings my story together? And maybe that's the pointy piece I would allude to, is like, and I think Hannah touched on this and Andrew as well. You guys had some almost, some good life advice there, which is just do what you love, right? And that's going to come through in your applications. But also you have to be sort of, cognizant of creating this story that, yes, you're genuine in pursuing it, but what's it going to look like at the end of the day, right? Because we're all here to sort of figure out how do we crack the nut of these schools. So I would say, I don't think I'd be able to say well-rounded or pointy. I'd rather just, say, think about that passion, like Hannah just mentioned, right? I think for Hannah, it was something different than perhaps an athlete. I think you'd alluded to this idea that, an athlete has the point, which is their athletics. I might push back on that a little bit. I actually tell students quite often who are athletes, don't spend your entire application writing about your sport. And some of them say, but I have to, I was working with a gymnast recently who had, he's in the gym all day, every day. That's what he does. It's how he learns about life. It's some amazing life lessons, no question. But I pushed back a little bit because I wanted him to think about, well, what's your academic interest as well? And can we find a way to sort of marry the two in an application, right? So I'll just give you a little example here because it's nice to have some concrete, something to hold on to, for that gymnast. He's very interested in bio and biophysics, and we connect that to motion, when he's on the mats, when he's doing the rings, bars, etc. Because really that's where largely that kind of an interest comes from, I think, right? It's for me, when I was growing up, I wanted to be pre-med and do the whole med thing. And I think it largely came from performing at a high level, pushing your body to an extreme, and then wondering, like, how am I doing this? Like, how am I recovering effectively? What makes a difference, on a Friday versus a Saturday, when you really get into the psychology of sports and performing, right? So for me, that was a natural transition into the med space, and asking questions about the human body. So if you can sort of, again, like the other panelists have said, I think everybody at one point or other has said, really pursue your passion, be genuine. I think probably, everybody in the audience is, just, be cognizant of the fact that eventually you're going to tie that into a story, and that can be your point. It doesn't mean you have to obsess over one thing and do one thing all the time. Just sort of like Joanna said, to have an eye to sort of these attributes, that you're developing. If they're not necessarily tied into the robotics that you love, you can still take a breather from that and go do something that's, environmentally oriented. And then you tie robotics to the environment, which is totally doable. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yes, perfect. Strategy. And maybe touch on the med pathway. I know there's huge interest in the sciences and medical pathway.
Yeah, so people might have seen me nodding when Hannah mentioned this idea of going through the law process, and undergrad in the States, and then deciding, I don't know if this is what you're saying, Hannah, exactly, but this is what I took from it because I have this experience as well with myself and other students. If you do your undergrad in the States, you have a lot of support for a profession like medicine, law. They'll have, like, we had HPA, health professions advising, where you would like go meet with a couple people who were, their job was to help you get to med school, basically, right? So they have all these resources, like years of intel, like walls of books and alum you can talk to and stuff, right? But I don't think that necessarily translates into if you want to go to school in Canada or in another country beyond the States, I don't think it's as helpful. Like I'll give you an example for the pre-med path. So I was pre-med at Princeton, just to give you guys like a little bit clearer of an understanding of my path, just for the sake of the story, is I went in as a mole bio major. You don't have to declare as a freshman when you're going to the school. You declare sophomore year, which is a second year in school. So that's good to know too, because I didn't really know that. I went to a public school in Toronto, right? Like my guidance counselor was a lovely woman, but she didn't really like know the US process very well. So when I applied, I was just like, okay, I'll tell you guys I want to study molecular biology because I love bio, et cetera, human body. But then I ended up shadowing a surgeon and sort of did this. I think Andrew mentioned this is sort of, you might be on one path and you do a 180 and head in a different direction. And I ended up, he was an awesome guy, and he encouraged me to study English and learn how to communicate, because as a surgeon, he felt that that was one of the things that set him apart from the others, like, you know, calming his patients down, et cetera, walking them through things. So I ended up majoring in English. Now, the reason I'm telling you all this will, you know, come through in a moment, but I continued with the pre-med path, but I couldn't take all of the pre-meds because of my English major. There's no overlap there, right? So you just only have so much time in a day. So I did like my chems, orgo, gen chem, a bit of bio, but then I had to do the post-bac. And the reason I bring all this up in connection to the question is because my health profession advisor didn't really, she could have told me, again, lovely woman, but she didn't quite know what it meant to go to school in Canada, like for medical school. And I think a lot of you might be in that bucket where you're like, I want to go do my undergrad down in the States and then potentially come back and practice medicine north of the border. And I felt like even though the resources were exceptional for like, if you wanted to go to an American med school, here's how to do it. Here are the prereqs you need, X, Y, Z, get it done. The Canadian school was more nuanced. Like you don't need a full year of this or that, right? And you could have taken that time to do that instead. You know what I mean? Like is more of a bespoke conversation I needed to have, which wasn't available. And Hannah, I don't know if you had this experience with law. I don't know if you were thinking about it in undergrad, but I guess that's maybe what I wanted to pull from what you were saying, because that was my experience. Yeah. It was very like, oh, well, here's the one size fits all for the American path to get to American med school. But like, you kind of have to do your own research if you want to go elsewhere. You know, and so in hindsight, looking back, and I help a lot of students with the med path now, I tell them certain things that I've learned along the way. Like I've gone in a different direction, but I still remember those days. So do your pre-meds, but also be aware that in the Canadian path, you might not need a full year of organic chemistry, for example. Unless you love that, like I would not advise that you do that. So things like that are important to think about. And then, yeah, maybe touching on this idea that you don't have to major in a science to go to medical school, which at my time and before was not as common as it is today. Like the MCAT has even changed to reflect this idea that you don't have to be hard science, pure natural science to be a good doctor. So that's something to think about too. And I think that ties into pursuing your passion. Like would I go back and do science instead of English? Absolutely not. Like, some of the experiences that I had through, certain bits of literature have been very important for me. So, yeah. Med path. I mean, I could say a bit more on that, Joanna, in terms of, things beyond class for the meds scene, like what to do in summers, because I get that question a lot, but also we can move on.
We'll hear from Richard first. Thank you.
Good.
Richard, pointy or well-rounded?
I was muted. So I'll first of all give the answer from a statistical perspective. If you look at the statistics of students that go in, you look at the story that present themselves in a common application, it tends to be that they craft themselves in a way that show to the review committee they know what they're doing, right? It's like there's a cohesive story. This is how I grew up. This is the way that I was educated, and this is how I discovered my passion, and this is what I would like to do. There's a cohesive story. So from that perspective, that being pointy is over being well-rounded, right? That's what statistics says. When I was in high school, I certainly was I certainly opted in for being pointy, okay? And I presented myself in a very pointy way, and telling them that I've always wanted to do physics because this is I discovered my passion, blah blah blah. Looking back, it really didn't present me as who I am, as who I was at that moment. I mean, yes, I like physics, but no, I wasn't. I didn't set my mind to be a physicist. I had an interest for drama. You know, I took 4 years of drama classes, and I really enjoy acting in Macbeth and in Hamlet. I really enjoy philosophy. Those are the things that I could have mentioned, but I didn't because I really wanted to appear pointy. And that didn't, I would say, looking back, that didn't serve me well. And I really resonated with many of what the panelists said is, rather than thinking about being pointy versus being rounded, be you, right? Think about who you are, what your values are, what you really care about, and write a story there. So I'm on the committee. I volunteer as an alum to interview for students coming through the MIT admission process. And I've seen, I've seen a whole range. There was once a student who said, when I asked him, why do you decide to engage in the robotics club in your school? And the way he phrased it is saying something like, I really enjoy robotics because I believe robotics is the future of humanity, and I wanted to help make the world a better place. And I said to myself, wow, that's the most corporate thing I've ever heard coming from a high school student. There was another student who, instead of sharing, her whole interview was focused on how she helped taking pictures for her school's the cleaning and maintenance staff members, and how because a lot of them don't speak English, so she learned Spanish. She was learning Spanish, and she used her Spanish skills to take photos for these caretakers who are often neglected in the community. And she put up picture wall, and and to give them highlights. And so she wrote about that and shared that, and I felt a certain empathic connections with the applicant. Is like the applicant is a human being, not just someone who wants to save the world. I felt more relatable. So yeah, and it's a balance. It's definitely a balance between presenting your authentic self and between presenting a story that the world wants to hear. And I'm, even up to today, I'm still learning that balance. And there's a book that I recommend that called 7 Rules of Power, which I'm reading to really help you hit that balance. And I would just wrap up my long speech by saying that it's okay if you're 15 and you don't know what you're doing. I'm 30 and sometimes I still don't know what I'm doing. I pivoted from, I was a math PhD, then I decided I don't like going for the academic route. So I pivoted towards being a venture capital investor in Silicon Valley. I worked in the Bay Area for 18 months as a VC, and I decided I don't like that. Now I'm back in Boston. I'm a real estate investor. So don't think of college as, right now, I'm sure you think of college as the destination. If I can get into Harvard, MIT, I'll be a person who's happy ever after. And I understand there's a lot of stress and people telling you that this is the path that you need to be. I would just encourage you to take a step back and discover who you really are, and to the best of your ability, craft that true self into your application. And I think in the long term and in the short term, that will serve you well.
Mm-hmm. And would you agree, Richard, with Sally's point? I mean, if you're a student athlete practicing your sport and passionate about your sport, you don't necessarily want to talk all about that in the application. I find when students are applying or considering MIT, for example, they're very math and science oriented, and that's what they want to talk about. It sounds to me that when you interviewed these students, you were looking for pieces outside of that, like the math and science is a given, high SAT score, a given. Now, what else do you have to present to the community?
I think that's a fair statement, that when I look for, when I review applicants, I assume that the reason that they apply for MIT is that they're interested in the math and science piece. Otherwise, again, do your research and see if MIT is a fit. And if your interest is, not in the math and science, or at least the math and science driven aspect of social science as well, then maybe MIT is not a fit for you. And based off that, what else distinguishes you, right, from the pool of applicants? And I think that's the story that's a kind of external dialogue / story that I often help my mentees prep, and I'm sure Joanna and her team at Prepskill can help you prep.
Wonderful, thank you. So Kiva, just maybe we're going to just go around the group and give us some insights. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and anything else that you want to add before we wrap this up in line with any questions that were provided? Go ahead, Kiva.
Yeah, I love this question. And it does tie into my answer to the previous question and what everybody else has said. So just to recap, I answered my previous question by saying that I was a kid who followed all the rules and tried to hit all the points to come off in a certain way and to sort of, meet the requirements. And the advice I would give to my 18-year-old self would be what everybody has said in relation to the previous question, which is take the time to step back and think about who you are, what drives you, what are you passionate about, what do you want to do in life? Because the thing that happens is when we don't take the time, when we sort of when we live life from the outside in, as opposed to from the inside out, that's not just going to affect our college application. That's going to affect the way we move in the world as individuals. And it does, and this is from personal experience, in my early 20s, it does result in a feeling of aimlessness or untetheredness. And this is why I echo what everybody else said for the previous question. And this is why I also mentioned that I favor the idea of being a pointy applicant, because to me, being pointy is obviously, if it's done in a genuine, authentic way, signals that this is intentional. There is a purpose, there is a why behind the thing that has resulted in this point, in this edge. And that's the advice I would give to any teen. And it is the advice that I currently give to teens that I work with and mentor. Don't think about ticking the box. Think about what ticks your box. Think about what it is that you don't have to know what you want to do for the rest of your life, but what is something you want to do right now, and take it from there, because it's not the thing that you're doing right now. It's the approach you're taking to life in general. It's the intention, it's the purpose, it's the why. And I would hope that any child, teen, adult lives their life in that way. Because honestly, that to me is the distinction between a life well lived and a life that is just aimless and untethered. Yeah, that's my answer.
Love that. Inside out. Love that. Andrew. What advice
Yeah,
would you give your 18-year-old self? Not too long ago for you.
not too long ago, but he would kind of hit it on the head. Like, I would say, yeah. I mean, it's literally just that. Don't, like, living from the inside out, living from a process-oriented life rather than a goal-oriented life, because I think a lot of us had our minds set on some of these universities, and we were, at least personally, like, I had my mind set on Stanford, and I was like, if I don't reach this, then everything's ruined. And then I didn't reach it, and I was depressed for a little bit of time, because that was what was where my identity came from and my validation came from. And it was in the decision to apply to these other American universities that it was so nonchalant that I was like, I'm just going to write an essay that, like, matters to me. And then that's what ended up getting me into these schools. Even then, when I got into this school, I was like, okay, you get that sense of accomplishment for like 3 seconds, and then you find a new goal to go after, right? And that's the issue with these, like, large goal-oriented lives, is like you're constantly grinding and grinding, and you don't take joy in the grind. You're just doing it for an express purpose. When you get there, you get it's not even like accomplishment, it's more a sense of relief for having made it there, and then you find something new. And so what I'm really, really proud about is I have taken the advice that I would give to my 18-year-old self, because now I'm applying, like, this past year, I was applying for a bunch of fellowships. And in writing the application, I was like, all I'm doing this for is for myself, like, to learn more about myself. And if one of these fellowships wants to give money to me, then that'd be great. But, like, I lost out on a lot of the fellowships because I wasn't tailoring it towards them. Like, I was just doing it for myself, and like, I was just being real about why I wanted to do this like form of self-reflection. And that didn't fit a lot of their prescribed plans. And that's okay. I understand why people want to get into these top universities, but you have to, at the end of the day, be okay with what you're putting out there. and the right things will eventually be added on, you will eventually achieve the things that you need to achieve, but it will be as a byproduct of enjoying the process, not as something that you're trying to reach. So yeah, that's the advice I would give to myself, and the advice I'd give to all you guys is you'll end where you need to, you'll end up where you need to be.
Yeah, live in joy and have that attraction come to you for sure. Thank you, Andrew. Kevin, your 18-year-old self.
I'm gonna sort of cheat and rewind the clock to my 15-year-old self, because I think my story is the exact same as Andrew's. I was 15 when I applied early action, I don't remember, to Stanford, and it was definitely like my dream school. I fell in love with the campus when we visited, and I remember when I didn't get in, I was absolutely floored. It did take me a few days to sort of recover from that, but the advice that I'd give to myself is it's gonna be okay. I really, really do believe that 9 times out of 10, it doesn't really matter what college you go to. Like, you'll be able to succeed no matter, like, with the right discipline and drive and all of that. You'll be able to succeed no matter where you go. So it's far more important that you take the time to really ensure that the place that you're going to spend the next 4 years of your life, which is a lot, some of your most formative years, with probably the most freedom and like lack responsibilities that you'll ever have in your life. It makes sure that you're going to be happy wherever you end up. And again, no, very rarely in life is any decision truly irreversible. So even if you end up somewhere that you're not super happy with, like, there are other options and avenues and stuff. But just because you don't get into your dream school, like, it sucks. It really, really does suck. But it is not the be all end all. And what I tell myself is, you're doing great now. So it's gonna be fine. Yeah.
Great. The school does not define you. Excellent. Hannah.
Two things. The first being, I wish I would have taken more advantage of that time right before you get into or right before you leave for university, the summer before, to really enjoy and invest in that in your interpersonal relationships, and the activities and things that you love. You'll never get that that time back in that way. The second would be to really embrace rejection and embrace failure. I would say that I've always been someone that never takes it personally, but I could have even, and to this day, lean more into that, because failure is and rejection is inevitable. But the good news is you will always be redirected to the opportunities that are for you. It's never, ever, ever a bad sign, especially because when I set my sights on Columbia as my dream school, I was acting of the opinion that was the school for me, and that was the pathway for me. And I visualized, what my life would look like in New York City. And when I ended up at Duke, which was the opposite of the experience that I was seeking out, I actually went on fall break to visit a friend of mine that I had met in the finalist weekend process for the scholarship that I was at Duke. She ended up at Columbia. So I went to go visit her at Columbia on fall break in my freshman year. And in that process and visiting her that weekend, I realized that I would have hated being a student at Columbia and hated being in New York at 17, because I wasn't ready to handle that. And I much appreciated being at a smaller school and in a more rural, isolated environment. So you never know. Rejection, it can be protection, and embracing failure will strengthen you in ways that you can't even imagine.
Love it. Embrace failure. Richard.
So I coach professionally students and high achievers on their mindset. So these are the kinds of things we spend months on. Since we are already out of time, I'll just give my quick 30-second guidance to my 18-year-old self. The first thing I would say is I know many of you set Harvard, MIT, or whatever school you have in mind as the benchmark. And I will say that, I definitely agree with Andrew and many of the panelists that you once you hit the achievement, you feel empty and you look for the next big thing, right? There's also always that delayed gratification. It's like, I got to hustle for the next thing, but that gratification never comes. Enjoy the process. Okay, that's the first advice I would give. And the second advice has to do with success. And I got this quote from somewhere that success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It can only ensue after you become the kind of person you are incredibly proud to be. Focus on, don't worry about how successful you are. Focus on knowing who you are and focus on giving, values, and serving. And the success will come on its way. Okay, and the third thing I notice I want to say has to do with the fixed and a limiting mindset, and I've seen it in some of the Q&As is, should I do SAT if school doesn't require it because I'm not good at a standardized test, or do I really have to do this because I'm really not good at it? You don't have to tell yourself that story that you're not good at something. I was born not to do this. I was born not to do that. Instead, think from a problem-solving perspective. Do I need to do this? If yes, what are the roadblocks of me being able to achieve it? And have confidence in yourself that you can resolve any issues along the way, that you can achieve whatever you have in your mind. Because when you tell yourself that in your mind that I cannot do this, then your brain cannot distinguish what you're telling yourself from what the truth is. The truth is, you're all smart and intelligent and young, and you can always learn. I think growth and learning are the biggest opportunities that you should focus on. So you don't have to tell yourself that story. That's what I want to say.
Wonderful. Growth mindset. Love it. Love it. And Sally.
Yeah, I think everything that's been said there, I mean, I'd agree with all of it. It's great. I might say, just to keep it short, I think working hard is really important. I'm sure you guys are all here because you do work hard. So I'd say like that a lot of times when you're feeling, you like things aren't happening, or you feel like, I think Hannah had touched on this idea of failure and embrace. And I think a lot of times just, keep going, keep pushing, work hard, because that's rewarding in itself, I think. And then I'd say really, when you can, help other people. I did see at times, they're very competitive environments when you get into Ivies. And I find, like, I think back to the Gen Chem days where like there were problem sets due, and, you had some kids that wouldn't want anyone to see their work, and then others, be like, okay, let's work on this together. And as long as you state that in the honor code, that's fine. So it's like a certain approach in life. And I think the students and the people that help out have more fulfilling lives in the end. I don't know if that's our goal necessarily here, but I think that's something to keep in mind. And then perhaps I think a few of the panelists have touched on this, just enjoying the now, because I can speak from experience. It goes by so fast, it's like a blink of an eye. I mean, it's just so important to work hard, like I said, right, and help other people, but have a good time too, so I think that ties into pursuing your passion as well, which many of the panelists have touched on already. You want to have an eye to the future always, and sort of a plan, but yeah, smile and enjoy stuff too.
Enjoy it now and serve others. Thank you so much. So we're out of time. We could talk for days about this, and we so appreciate having you here with us today. And thank you so much to our insightful panelists, and we really, really appreciate all the experience and insights that you've provided. We have a few questions that are lingering, but we'll get those answered and over to you at some point next week. And if you want to reach out to any of our panelists, please feel free to reach out to myself or the Prepskills team at info@prepskills.com, or many of you have my direct email address as well. thank you again for joining us, and we so appreciate having you here, and wish you much success on your own journey. And I know you'll find it, and we're here to support and help, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Joanna.
Yeah,
Thank
bye-bye.
you.
Thanks, Joanna. Bye.
Thanks.